The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE marked the beginning of a thousand-year transformation in Western Europe, a period we call the Middle Ages. In these centuries, the region evolved from a politically fragmented landscape of Germanic kingdoms to a unified Christendom under the influence of the Roman Catholic Church. Shaped by its geography, mountains, rivers, peninsulas, and fertile lands, Western Europe adapted to both isolation and opportunity, developing rural economies and new political orders in the absence of centralized Roman authority. From the so called Dark Ages, when urban life declined and literacy waned, through the powerful reigns of the Merovingian and Carolingian dynasties, leaders like Charlemagne sought to revive Roman traditions, expand Christianity, and reform administration, education, and culture. External threats from Vikings, internal changes through feudalism and manorialism, and the economic and spiritual authority of the Church all defined the medieval world. The High Middle Ages brought renewed stability, agricultural growth, and urban development, while guilds emerged to regulate trade and craftsmanship. The late Middle Ages, however, were marked by crisis, centuries of war, plague, and religious division that reshaped Europe's political and social order. By 1500 CE, Western Europe had endured immense challenges and transformations, laying the foundations for the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the modern era. In this lecture, we will explore how geography, politics, religion, economics, warfare, and cultural change together defined life in Western Europe from the fall of Rome to the threshold of modern history. Western Europe sat on the margins of history because of its geographic location at the far western end of the Eurasian landmass. It was far removed from growing trade routes, as it was not near the Indian Ocean, the Silk Roads to China, or the sand roads to West Africa. So it wasn't until the eastern and western hemispheres were joined after 1500 that Western Europe had a geographically central position in the global network. Internally, the population centers were divided by mountain ranges, dense forests, five major peninsulas, and two large islands, Britain and Ireland. There were also extensive coastlines and interior rivers that did facilitate exchange within the area. The moderate climate produced fertile soils for productive agriculture that supported a growing population in the High Middle Ages. As you learned previously, it was in the year 476 CE that the barbarian Flavius Odoacer led a series of revolts against the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus. After this, other Germanic tribes flocked into the region and established their own spheres of influence. This marked the end of the Roman Empire during the Classical era and saw the rise of the Middle Ages. While the Germanic tribes, known as barbarians, didn't want to destroy Roman culture, their presence had a negative impact on the area. This is a major turning point in the West. All large-scale centralized rule vanished. Disease and warfare reduced Western Europe's population by over 25%. Urban life diminished sharply, and Europe reverted to a largely rural existence because Roman law was not being distributed or upheld throughout the area. A common language, Latin, was no longer commonly used, and thus the large land area was no longer unified as one people. The infrastructure of Western Europe was much more rural than Byzantium and had nothing to compare to Constantinople. It didn't really take off in growth until after 10,000 CE, so during the period of the Dark Ages, long distance trade dried up and Roman roads deteriorated. Money exchange gave way to the barter system, and literacy rates lost ground. Technology, scientific inventions, and learning stalled for a period of several hundred years as people reverted back to a harsh subsistence lifestyle. Many scholars now call this the Dark Ages, a historical periodization emphasizing the cultural and economic deterioration that occurred in Western Europe following the decline of the Roman Empire from about 500 to 1000 CE, the early Middle Ages, and Middle Ages or medieval period can further be subdivided into the following ages. First, the early Middle Ages from 476 to 1000, corresponding roughly with the Dark Ages. The High Middle Ages from 1000 to 1300 CE, and the Late Middle Ages from 1300 to 1453. Yet much that was classical or Roman persisted, even as a new order emerged in Europe. On the political front, a series of regional kingdoms led by Visigoths in Spain, Franks in France, Lombards in Italy, and Angles and Saxons in England arose to replace Roman authority. But many of these Germanic peoples, originally organized in small kinship-based tribes with strong warrior values, had already been substantially Romanized. Contact with the Roman Empire in the first several centuries CE had generated more distinct ethnic identities among them, militarized their societies, and given greater prominence to Woden, their god of war. As Germanic peoples migrated into or invaded Roman lands, many were deeply influenced by Roman culture, especially if they served in the Roman army. On the funeral monument of one such person was a telling inscription: "I am a Frank by nationality, but a Roman soldier under arms." The West was divided politically and culturally, but the Christian Church soon gave the area religious unity. This came with the conversion of Germanic tribes to Christianity. This shift was largely due to the monastic orders that emerged in the 2nd century. During this time, the Church successfully sent monks out as missionaries to convert Germans. Monasticism or monkhood is a religious way of life in which one renounces worldly pursuits to devote oneself fully to spiritual work. It is based upon concepts of self-denial of pleasure and an attempt to imitate the life of Jesus. If you will be perfect, sell all that you have, give it to the poor, and follow me. Matthew 19:21. The people who lived this life were monks, from the Latin word monachus, or someone who lives alone. Following the kinship-based tribal organizations, there were a series of regional kingdoms led by the Visigoths in Spain, the Franks in France, the Lombards in Italy, and Angles and Saxons in England. All arose to replace Roman authority. The Franks were the only long-lasting Germanic state, as they spanned modern-day France, Netherlands, part of Italy, and other regions at their peak. The Franks can be further broken down into various dynasties of ruling family lines, with the two most important dynasties being the Merovingian dynasty and the Carolingian dynasty. The prestige of things Roman remained high, even after the empire itself had collapsed. Now, as leaders of their own kingdoms, the Germanic rulers actively embraced written Roman law, using fines and penalties to provide order and justice in their new states in place of feuds and vendettas. One Visigoth ruler named Adalhulf, who had married a Roman noblewoman, gave voice to the continuing attraction of Roman culture and its empire. Quote, "At first I wanted to erase the Roman name and convert all Roman territory into a Gothic empire. But long experience has taught me that, without law, a state is not a state. Therefore, I have more prudently chosen the different glory of reviving the Roman name with Gothic vigor, and I hope to be acknowledged by posterity as the initiator of Roman restoration."